Today's episode is brought to you by the Hippocratic Collective. Check out our shows and join the conversation at thehippocratic-collective.com. Hello, I'm Joan. I'm a Canadian family physician who also works as a restorative medical educator, facilitator, and coach. I create spaces that rehumanize the work of healthcare. I'm creating this podcast to remind myself, as well as anyone else working in a helping profession, that when you are working and caring for your human patients, you are the other human in the room. Hello there, healthcare humans. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of The Other Human in the Room. Okay, so today's episode is another solo episode, just you and me. And it's interesting. The theme of this episode is about enjoying your difficulties. And I will share that I have been given the beautiful opportunity and invitation to practice enjoying my difficulties, as I had a wonderful plan to record this episode about an hour and a half ago, and my camera died, would not turn on, all the troubleshooting, me on the support chat with Logitech. And here we are having found a solution, which is I'm using my phone. If you listen to this via audio, I hope that you notice zero difference because it's the same microphone, everything's the same. But if you watch this on YouTube or if you watch any of my social media clips, I'm just sort of tripping out. Like, this is the quality that my phone can offer. It's very precariously balanced. I don't have official, I've really MacGyvered a situation here that I'm hoping does not fall through. And I'm also hoping I don't get a phone call in the middle of this. So many potential delights to experience over our time together. And very on brand and on theme for what I wanted to talk to you all about today, which is the art and spiritual practice of enjoying your difficulties. And I'm using it as the theme to debrief and unpack and even just record for myself the memories of my recent trip to Nashville. So I'm recording this on a Monday. A little over a week ago, I returned from a trip to Nashville. I spent a Thursday through Sunday down south in, our neighbors to the south for me as a Canadian, in Nashville, Tennessee, a place I had never been before. And I went there on business, technically. I went there specifically because the Hippocratic Collective, the podcast network and media company that I am a part of now, were holding their first in-person summit for all of the co-founders and prominent members within the collective. I've been looking forward to this ever since we started planning it. And the beautiful thing that had worked out was that at the very same time, I was going to be in Nashville and had a plan to meet up with the Hippocratic Collective folks. My co-host of my other podcast, Jamie Lee Finch, who co-hosts Experiential Anatomy with me, she was also going to be in Nashville because she spends a week or so every few months in Nashville, though she now lives in the state of Washington. But she comes to Nashville often for her massage therapy bodywork practice, because that's where she's licensed, because she used to live in Nashville and that's where she did all of her training and stuff. And so this beautiful thing was aligning where basically all of my podcast people, everyone that I have been in regular online virtual relationship with over the past for the HC over the past 6 or so months, and for Experiential Anatomy and with Jamie, quite a number of years that we've been in relationship online, I was going to get to meet all these people in person. And it so happened to fall in the middle of my 3-week summer sabbatical that I love to take every August. And I have been looking forward to it for some time. I love anticipating things. I love daydreaming about what it would be like. I love thinking through all the different elements and feeling the excitement of that and feeling kind of the fantasy ahead of time of how it will feel to share space with people I haven't met yet in person and all the different things I'd planned for myself. And so I was really looking forward to this sort of big adventure in Nashville. And the reason that I'm calling this podcast Enjoy Your Difficulties versus pure bliss where nothing goes wrong, is that things went wrong about this trip. And one of the things I was really reflecting on, like as things were going wrong, was deep, deep gratitude to my past self for building up this skill set that allowed me to have a good time in the midst of trouble, to enjoy my difficulties, right? So, just to give like the brass tacks recap of like the facts of what happened. So I was flying down on a Thursday and flying back on a Sunday. And one of the things that happened is in the days leading up to me leaving, on the news, they were talking about how Air Canada, which was the airline company I had booked my flights through, the flight attendants union was planning to strike on the Saturday. So like when I was in Nashville, they were planning to strike. So at first I was thinking, okay, well, we'll see. A lot of times people like threaten to strike, and then that like, forces everyone to figure out a way to get along. And so I was sort of holding off having any kind of opinion about that. But as time was ticking closer, it was looking more real that it was going to happen. Air Canada was sending out emails to myself and other people who had flights booked in this time frame saying, hey, there's a good possibility your flight's going to be canceled. Do you want to move it? And I did not want to move it because like they wanted me to move it to like the next week. And I was not interested in spending an additional week in Nashville. Was looking forward to it, but I wanted to get home to my family, especially because my husband was meant to travel for work the next day, like on the Monday after I returned. So there was also some like stakes involved in terms of, my contribution to like keeping our family safe and cared for that I wanted to uphold. So things were starting to unfold that way. So that was one of the major difficulties, was this like ongoing uncertainty about if Air Canada was going to strike, and if Air Canada specifically was going to cancel my Sunday flight home, and would I be stranded in Nashville? The other difficulty that unfolded, and you may hear me go like this. I'll cut some of them out because it's not that delightful to listen to. But I am now, thankfully, finally, at the tail end of a really unpleasant viral respiratory illness that I started to develop the day before I was meant to leave. I had seen my little sweeties with their little runny noses that I do not know where they caught it from, camp or something, a few days before. And I was like, well, we'll see what happens to me. And yes, the Wednesday before I'm meant to fly across the sky to another country, I started having a cold, and I was hopeful it'd be just a cute little one, just wear a mask on the plane, and then, you have sniffles, and then it all settles down. But no, this cold unfolded over the time that I was in Nashville in pretty severe, nasty ways. In fact, it like kicked off the old experience in an incredibly unpleasant way, which was that Wednesday night, the night before I was supposed to wake up at 4 a.m. to get to the airport, to get on my flight to Nashville early in the morning. And in part, I think because I knew I needed to get there at 4 a.m. And so I kept thinking, I need to fall asleep so that I can sleep before I have to wake up. And it was a really bad cold. Like my nose was on fire. I took all the medicine, didn't matter, plugging up, sniffling, like all the usual things. Healthcare humans, I don't know that I slept a wink that night. I had a completely, I think, sleepless night that Wednesday night, to the point where, and then I was like trying not to wake up Francis, who I knew he had to have a whole day. He kept getting up. I was getting up. I was like, I need to get out of here. So I like left my house at 3 a.m. just to be like, maybe I'll sleep at the airport. I did not sleep at the airport. They do not make it easy to sleep at an airport. They do not, unless I wanted to just lie on the ground, which I wasn't that committed to the project. You don't have anything to lean against. My goodness. And so those, I would say, were the core difficulties. Other than also, like, I was traveling to a place I didn't know. I was meeting people that I've only met online, and we're now going to interact with them interpersonally in ways that I hoped would be wonderful and connective. But like, in person, you realize all the little rhythms of sharing space with someone, with running a schedule with someone, that you realize like, oh, actually, you're a human, I'm a human, and we see things slightly differently, or there's different expectations. So like, there's also that level of difficulty. Like, not love all these people still, nothing horrible happened, but like there's also just like humaning beside each other in real time feels different and takes a different amount of energy. And, as an introvert, I, recognize I was going to be expending a lot of social energy. So all of those things, I think about how if I had done the same trip a number of years ago, I would have just said that the trip was ruined. I would have said like, I had a terrible time and nothing was good about it, and all of my plans were thwarted, and I can't believe I had been so excited about this thing and it was totally ruined and spoiled by all of these things because I couldn't stop worrying about the Canada flight, and I couldn't stop being bothered by my nose and bothered by my chills. At one point, I lost my sense of taste and smell. And then, yes, I went to, and I got the American version of a rapid COVID test, and did it actually in Centennial Park next to the Taylor Swift bench, as you do, in the very stifling heat. It was negative, thankfully, but obviously I still had something. Like, all of that, I could tell myself and others the story of that, of being like, this was the trip from hell. What a nightmare. It totally ruined my experience. And especially if I was thinking of that anymore, I'm like, this is a nightmare. I'm losing my voice. I started to lose my voice, which is interesting if you're planning to like podcast and create social media content with a bunch of people for an entire day, right? So I'm going to be like, it's over. It's ruined. Everything's terrible. And that would have been like a valid conclusion to make, right? I also could have done a thing that I have tried to do where like I have all that under the surface, and then instead I'm just like not feeling any of the feelings of that. And then instead I'm just like, it's fine. It's fine. No, it's good. It's great. It's great. And like, and I would still at some point have a freak out, and like it would still underneath the actual story I'm telling myself is that things are ruined and terrible, but I'm just trying to gaslight myself that they're not there. Right. Those seem to be the two extremes that I used to think were the only two options of like, either you have to just like be positive and pretend everything's great, even though you are in like physical and mental discomfort, or you have to just give in to the misery and be like, I hate life and everyone, and I'm going to complain and grumble to myself and others and kind of have a sulk in the corner, And so listen, like if you are hearing me describe this and you're like, I usually do one of those two things, or I oscillate between those two things, I'm not judging you. I've been there. I am you. We are the same. And I just want to share with you this third option that I have discovered over time, and that honestly, in my opinion, is the best of all the worlds, in that I get to still have a good time and not gaslight myself in a way that is dissociative and lying to myself. And that is this concept that I learned many years ago now called enjoy your difficulties. The context in which I learned it is like kind of random. And there's a part of me that wants to be like, oh, what a privileged thing. But listen, okay, it's my experience, so here you go. Before I had kids, my husband and I traveled to Africa. And one of the things we trained up to do, and we did, was we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And on that climb, you have guides that come with you. I feel like guides isn't the fully correct word, but I can't think of what the correct word is. But they're these wonderful people who are like local to Tanzania, who like do this climb like basically every week with other random tourists from around the world like us. And we were sitting in a hut, maybe halfway up the mountain, or like, yeah, closer to the final ascent, which like we wake up at midnight, and then you climb through the darkness so that we could arrive at sunrise. And it's like the thinnest air. It's the physically and mentally most challenging part. And so these two guides were like sitting with us, and they were like trying to get us prepared for the fact that this would be the most challenging part of our journey. And one of them said like, the way you do it is you just like remind yourself how good it's going to feel at the end. And yes, it sucks now and everything's terrible. But then you just like kind of think positive and think about the future and look forward to the time where things will get better. Like you sort of, and I feel like that's very common advice, and it's not bad advice. It is a strategy you can absolutely use to get through things. It's like, this sucks now, but it's going to be better later. And you kind of use the hope of the good thing at the end to like white knuckle through the bad. And so, I'm listening to that and I'm like, that's pretty good advice. Okay. But then the other guide was like, like I hear that advice and I think that's really great advice. And I actually want to offer alternative advice that I think actually works better and that I found to be better in my life. And that, which is like, while the difficulties are happening, what if you learned to enjoy your difficulties? So he's saying like, this climb and the breathlessness and the pain of it and the mental exhaustion, the physical exhaustion, this is actually like part of what you signed up for. What if you learned to enjoy the difficulties? So you're not delaying your pleasure till when it finally feels better. You can find pleasure even now in the difficulties. And that phrase, enjoy your difficulties, like, no, don't just enjoy the good times, enjoy your difficulties too. That has really stuck with me. And I want to say, just like any kind of idea or phrase, there's probably some really like crappy way you could say it to someone that's like invalidating their experience. And so, just like everything I offer, if the way that I'm speaking of this doesn't hit well and you're like, no, it's not for me, all of this is only ever an invitation. All of this, as I often say in my other podcasts, is descriptive, not prescriptive. I'm just sharing what allowed me to have a good time on this Nashville trip, because I really noticed like this is the kind of thing that I usually would be really like grumbling and sad and like really ruining my own experience further with like this notion that like this isn't how it was supposed to be. And though there's validity to holding space for that, and that actually is like kind of one of the steps of enjoying your difficulty is like to acknowledge your difficulties. It's not the final destination. What I've noticed is that when I am in, and it's not really a destination, but more just like, it's like a spiritual practice, frankly. It is as a life skill, a mental, physical practice of finding enjoyment, pleasure, like physical, mental, and spiritual pleasure from your difficulties. It unlocks a different like level of life. It means that like nothing can ever ruin things. Of course, all sorts of horrible events happen that like ruin a hope or an expectation of a certain outcome. Yes. And if you find a way to enjoy at least some of your difficulties of life, if there's certain difficulties that just feel too hard to enjoy and joy doesn't even feel like it's in the same planet, much less the same room, that's okay too. Some things are so purely whatever they are that like to get there doesn't feel right. That's fine. But I'm telling you, something like this, something that was like, this wasn't about my livelihood. This wasn't about my basic survival. This was like something I hoped to enjoy, a trip to Nashville. And the fact that I found a way to still enjoy it, I was going to say despite the difficulties, but I'm going to say like including the difficulties. That's what I want to talk about and share with you. Because I've sort of thought through like, I like thinking kind of on a granular level, like how was I able to do that and to share that? Because sometimes like, people just assume, oh, that person's personality means they're more easygoing, they're more lighthearted, and so they can just have a good time wherever they go. And maybe there are people where like default wise that's more accessible to them, and like genetics, personality, nature, nurture, whatever, you can like talk it all through. But I'm going to tell you like that like these are not core parts of my personality. These are skills I've had to practice. Because like I said, past me would have just had a like full miserable time, right? And so I just wanted to share the core strategies that I have sort of developed over time and discovered sort of for different reasons. But when I put them all together, I had so many moments of like gratitude to past self. That happens a lot for me. Like when I'm having a really good time in the present, one of actually the ways that I can fully savor and enjoy that is being like, past Joan, thank you so much. I know you are not having as good of a time because you're still like figuring out how to have a good time. And thank you for doing that work because here we are now and we get to experience this together. And like little high five past Joan for being like, thank you so much. Now we're having a good time in spite of all of this uncertainty, in spite of all of this like physical discomfort. We're here, we're doing it. So, okay. In terms of like, how does one enjoy your difficulties? The two components that I can break down. One is changing my relationship to the difficulty. So changing my approach. And I really like relationship, thinking of the events as a being and me as another being, and how am I relating to these difficulties? And how am I allowing the difficulties to relate to me? How am I relating to myself with this background of these difficulties? Those pieces are critical. And there's sort of two different strategies I'm going to talk about within that bucket. And then the second bucket is building my capacity to enjoy, to actually like commit to the act of enjoying. Language is funny, isn't it? But like, if you are not used to feeling pleasure and intentionally enjoying and savoring and delighting in things, then it will make it very hard to enjoy difficult things. Maybe that seems like so basic, but I didn't know that until recently. When I started doing like my pleasure activism, intentional pleasure practices, that was the second component that opens up my ability to actually enjoy my difficulties. So how I relate to my difficulties and actually knowing how to enjoy anything. Those are the two things that had allowed me to have a great time in Nashville. So breaking them down just a little bit more and like using examples from my trip. So starting with like relating differently to my difficulties. I mean, the core thing that I used to think was my personality and a default setting that I had no control over was like old me would have been so riddled with anxiety about the uncertainty involved in this trip. So will my flight be canceled? How will this illness unfold? How will people think of me as I move through this time? And like all the social anxieties of like how people will perceive me. Are they happy with me? Are they mad with me? And like inside sort of fighting with like beating up myself about things I say wrong, beating myself up for having a cold, beating myself up and the universe up for giving me all these difficulties. Like all of that at its core, I have really discovered like in terms of the most potent antidote to all of that kind of uncertainty, anxiety has been developing self-trust, actually developing a trusting relationship in myself. And if you want to hear me speak in more detail about like some of the core components of how I practice self-trust, I actually made a whole free email-based course about it's framed under like stop worrying about your patients. It's on my website, joanchanmd.com. It's all free. Like if you also scroll back in this podcast feed, you can hear the red, what do I want to say, audio versions of each of those little lessons, because there's a few components broken down in there. But just to say it more broadly, just practicing the somatic and mental knowledge that no matter what happens, I will be okay with myself. Yes, I might not be like physically feeling that okay, but like I vow not to beat myself up. I vow to honor and love myself no matter what. I also have a deep, intimate relationship with my body and know whatever she is feeling and expressing to me, it is from a place of love. And no matter what feelings I will potentially feel, like fear of the panic of having a flight canceled and being stranded. I don't fear that anymore because I know how to feel panic with her. We can do this together. Also, if I don't prefer to be in that state, I can take steps ahead of time to give myself the best chance of staying regulated. Like those two things kind of coexist together. And so that's what actually helped me stay in a place where I wasn't stuck in like indecision. Speaking specifically first of like the Air Canada bit. So like in the past, I think I would have waffled back and forth a lot. I would have second guessed whatever decisions I was making because I was like, I Googled how long it would take to drive back from Nashville, and it would have taken like 12 and a half hours, and like looked up estimates of how much that would probably cost to like have a rental car one way across the border. And it would have been some number of hundreds of dollars. Also like and so I sort of like felt into that possibility of like, do I want to have that as my backup? I looked up different flights, and I was at first really like not wanting to spend more money on a flight I wouldn't need. But one of the things I felt out for myself as, things started to get more clearly like Air Canada's like, yeah, like you have a high chance of your Sunday flight being canceled, even though it's not canceled yet. And I just felt through for myself, knowing myself, what's the experience I want to like set myself up for, like in the present? How do I want to treat my future self? Knowing what I know and letting go of the things I can't know, right? And so for me, I was like, okay, I don't want to be on my phone double checking if my flight's canceled all of Saturday and be distracted. I'd rather have like my plan in place. I am willing to spend some amount of money in order for that sort of peace of mind. And thankfully, when I like Googled flights, there was an $1,100 flight from WestJet that was a direct flight later in the day that looked appealing, but that is too much money. That is more money than my peace of mind cost, in my opinion, especially because much earlier in the day, like at like 6 o'clock in the morning, there was a much longer with a layover flight from American Airlines. But it was only $200. And to me, $200, I was like, I will just eat that $200. If I end up paying for an extra ticket and I don't end up using it, that to me felt worth it, thinking of what I wanted my sort of mental and somatic experience to be. So I made each of those things requires self-trust and self-knowledge to know like what will be the most supportive to me. And thinking of it from this like self-supportive framework versus like in the past, it would have been like, what's the right decision? What are people going to like judge me most for? Like, who's going to be mad at me if I make the wrong decision? Honestly, that's like how I made most of my decisions, even ones that like literally mainly only impacted me, like this flight decision. Like I was going to have to be the one that was driving, but it used to be like, honestly, it would be my poor husband, Francis, who I like, because of codependency stuff that I've worked on, but like I would be like, whatever his opinion, if whatever he thinks is right, like I'd ask him to help me make the decision. But in this case, I was like, no, I'm the one having this experience. I want to think this through for myself. And when I thought it through for myself, I bought that ticket. And I'm very glad I did because, at the end of the day, the Saturday night, finally, I got the text saying that my Air Canada flight was officially canceled. And I got a refund. And actually, it was like cheaper. I actually ended up making money. Now, even if that hadn't happened, like say then it was never canceled, I would have felt through. And honestly, I probably still would have taken the earlier flight, even if I could have had the later one, just to have that greater sense of like, I'm on a flight. I know I'm home. I'll make my way home. Yes, this is a less comfortable experience because I have to wake up earlier and I'm on more planes and in more airports. But speaking of enjoying your difficulties, all that discomfort is like chosen. Speaking of like pick your challenge, like I talked about in my last like solo episode, like I'm choosing this on purpose, even if there's uncomfortable parts of it. And like American Airline, there is no leg room. Like they were less comfortable flights even than Air Canada. And that's like saying something. And the discomfort was worth it because it was something I was choosing in the direction of what my ultimate desires were. And I trusted and affirmed my choices each step of the way instead of beating myself up and saying that was a waste, that was silly, you can't trust yourself. That took so much practice and time to build up over many, many years. It started with small decisions, often clinical decisions actually. And that practice led me to be able to really feel like, often we use the word confident. And I think of confidence is equivalent to self-trust. Like those things are the same concept to me. I could make those decisions from this really like loving, self-affirming place. And that felt great. And I would say the same thing with all the illness stuff. So like, as I was getting sicker, I made choices. I definitely still have within me the like viral illness ethics of it all, and how there definitely are strong opinions of like what to do when you have a respiratory viral illness. And there are also like our policies of what to do and like medical advice of what to do. And it doesn't all fully match, though sometimes it does. And like I thought through each of them and what felt right to me, including like I did wear a mask on the plane. But then I like checked with the people I was going to be seeing and asked like, would you like me to wear a mask? And if they said no, I made the choice then not to wear a mask. You know, so like I made each of these choices, and absolutely there would be someone who, if they knew the choices I made, would be like judging me so harshly for them in every direction. And I just know what felt right for me and what I would, you know, if someone was like, hey, that's not what you should do, like I could hear them out and I would know why I did what I did. Same idea. And just to say, like, who is this girl? The same me from a few years ago. So that was a practice. And that is like, I would say the hugest shift in changing my relationship to difficulty. Because it used to be, oh no, something difficult happened. I can't trust myself. Now I'm lost. Now I'm swimming in anxiety and shame and indecision. But all I need to do is trust myself, and I can handle any difficulty. Even if it's like with discomfort, even if it's with disappointment. Holding space for disappointment was an important part of it. Of like, yeah, this isn't going how you wished it would go. I get that. And like, it didn't mean the world was ending because I can trust myself to figure a way through. So that's like the first part of relating differently to difficulties. And the second part is pacing. So my favorite way to think of trauma that I learned from my somatic therapist, Kristen Honey, is trauma happens when you have like an unexpected, unwanted experience that happens to you too fast, too much, too soon, right? And I was having unwanted experiences of, especially like as the weekend was unfolding, like feeling sick and having different amounts of energy, as well as like the complete sleep deprivation and sleep being really wacky. Like those were really impacting me physically and therefore mentally and emotionally, right? And so one approach that I would have taken is like, no, I'm determined to still have every single part of this experience, and I'm going to power through it all, like, and ignore my body. And then, you know, would be somewhat disappointed that I wasn't able to enjoy it. But doesn't that make sense? Like if you're powering through and disconnecting from your body is the vessel that gets to feel joy and pleasure. So how can you enjoy something if you're disconnecting from it, from her in my case, right? So pacing, aka, you know, creating space, my whole concept over here, an essential part for me to relate differently to these difficulties. So looking at the backdrop, feeling my fatigue, it's really spoon theory kind of stuff. If you recall that past episode, I was like, I have way less spoons here. So day one, I arrive, Jamie picks me up from the airport. I feel like I'm kind of on drugs from sleep deprivation and how like unwell I felt. So I was like, okay, how am I going to approach the day? And I really did it like one thing at a time. Like the first thing that we did is actually she fed me, and that was delicious. We had a beautiful conversation with the host of the retreat house I was staying at. That was beautiful. And then she gave me a 2-hour bodywork session, which again, same thing. Like my nose was so plugged the whole time. It wasn't deeply relaxing in that sort of blissed out way because my infection was so like present and this like undercurrent of discomfort. And it meant I had to breathe deeply through my mouth the whole time. And like, honestly, it was sort of a transcendent experience. So I had that. And all of that was like one thing. And then after that, I sort of felt out, what else do I feel like I have capacity for? And so Jamie had suggested that we then do some like pool and sauna alternating, and then we can talk about our podcast and the future. And I like felt into myself and I was like, yes, that feels like something I can do. That doesn't feel like too much of an expenditure of energy, and it's more mental energy. And I felt quite like restored and clarified just by the bodywork session. If you're going to make friends with someone, make friends with bodyworkers. And like, I paid for that session and I was happy to do so. But like, my God, that was like an incredible thing to experience when you're feeling so under-resourced, honestly. So then we did this like ideation together. But then Jamie had also planned for us to like go out that evening. She was planning to go out and do different things. And this is the sort of thing that like old people pleaser Joan would have been like, oh, I have to go along with her. Like she's inviting me. Like she'll be mad if I don't. And it also really helped that Jamie is like all about like recovery from codependency, so like sovereign over herself. So like it wasn't a situation where she was like, oh, I won't go out if you don't go out. Which anyway, even if she'd said that, that would have been her lane in her journey. But it was useful that she was like, I'm going to do this because this is what feels good. And then you tell me what feels good for you. And what felt good for me was like ordering Uber Eats barbecue, got a redneck taco, which was incredible. And then going to bed by 7:30. I was like, I am not doing any evening activities. I just like lay very still and then like passed out at 7:30. And so that allowed me to enjoy the earlier parts of the day and then really recognize now this is the end of the day. And then that gave me more restorative energy for the next day instead of like fully powering through. We think it has to be all or nothing, but pacing means that we put out the energy we can and then we pause and reassess. We check where our capacity is in any given moment, in any given day. And the gift of being unwell, honestly, and I say this from a place of privilege, knowing like I do not have a chronic disability. And so I'm not saying everyone has to feel this way, but what I am saying is I was aware that the fact that my capacity was so decimated by sleep deprivation and this viral illness meant that the spoons I had left, I viewed as like precious, precious golden objects. And I could really sense what I wanted to say yes to and what felt right to say no to, even though on a different day with a different bucket of energy, I very much would have been enticed to go do those things. But it was like such a clear no. And that changes my relationship to the difficulties. So if I think I have to white knuckle blast through all the difficulties irregardless, my body's going to scream at me at some point and I'm going to have a worse time. But if part of how I'm relating to the difficulties is withdrawing from some of them and deciding and setting boundaries around how much I'm exposing myself to, right? That's how it works with like the rest of my life and clinical work, right? Like I enjoy the difficulties of my clinical work and I'm able to enjoy them in part because I know how much of them I expose myself to and how much I do things like podcasting and stuff instead, right? That's my whole creating space philosophy. So that piece of relating differently to your difficulties, in my opinion, is essential if you want to actually enjoy them. So that's like that first bucket. My relationship to myself being more self-trusting, and through that self-trust, pacing out my day, pacing out my energy. As Taylor Swift would say most recently on a podcast debut, your energy is expensive. What do you want to spend it on? Such a good quote. And so really pacing that through, like even later at the HC summit, we had a very full day that I had intentionally planned some breaks in, but as happened, some of those got a little minimized because excitement and ideas were flowing. And there's a certain point in the day where I was feeling energy low. So I stepped out onto the porch and played my ukulele and sang some Taylor Swift songs and a Casey Musgrave song and with one of the other people who was at the event, and really was like, I need to take this space for myself. And that allowed me then to dive back in and enjoy the rest of it. Just another example, right? So really feeling out where you need those pockets, especially if the time you're going through is more challenging and isn't going the way you wanted to, knowing that pacing is very self-supportive and often essential if you want to still have a good time. And so that means that you don't have to have that FOMO thing, because it's like, no, the times I'm going to have will be the good times. And then the times I'm missing were not for me. Instead, the things I'm missing out on are facilitating me having a good time with the things I'm actually doing, So all of that is the first bucket. Then the second bucket is really a reiteration of past podcasts about building my capacity for joy. I have a whole episode about building capacity for joy. I have 2 episodes about pleasure activism. A lot of this is sort of greatest hits of past podcasts because I've gone into these things in more detail. But really just every time over the past number of years, I've sat down and played my ukulele, danced, read a book that was just for pure pleasure, gone out on a walk and, talked to my sister trees, like all these things, the way that they are populated in my regular schedule at all times. And I intentionally spend time practicing pleasure and undoing the shame and anxiety and guilt connected to pleasure I used to feel just means that I have a wider access to feeling pleasure in any situation. It means the good parts of, that bodywork session, the ideation with Jamie, hilarious laughing moments at the summit, connection with people I haven't met before. Like I had more pure connection to the joy and pleasure I felt about those because I've practiced it over time. And then even the difficult moments like the COVID test in the Centennial Park or feeling super tired but still wanting to go see the Koi Fish guitar at the Country Music Hall of Fame, just like random examples, like I was able to still focus in and really enjoy those moments because I know how to enjoy a moment. I know the stuff, like maybe it all seems so obvious, but I didn't know it for a lot until a few years ago. So I need to share it in case you also don't know it. So that, and I'm not going to say more than that. I have multiple past episodes, like I've said, that are all about learning to feel pleasure, learning to enjoy life writ large. And that means even the tough moments, what's enjoyable here, there often is, including it's enjoyable to get a little sulky and sucky about how sick you feel and have a little pout. One of the enjoyable things I did was after I ate my barbecue dinner, I lay very still and watched a Swiftie reaction to the Taylor Swift podcast for a couple of hours until I finally passed out at 7:30 at night. That was, and in this very cozy room in this beautiful yoga retreat house that I was in, that was a delicious pleasure in and of itself, as well as the pleasure of meeting beautiful people and seeing beautiful things. Each of those gets to be its own pleasure. I let myself have a sweet little pity party a number of times and felt the real pleasure of self-pity of just this sucks. This isn't what you wanted. I know. Feel it, baby. And then the feeling would dissipate and then I could move on to feeling other things, but really enjoying sulking about it for a minute. Go ahead and do that and not feel guilt or shame about that either. All of that pleasure practice is what allowed me to not just the first things I've just talked about are change your relationship to your difficulties. But if you actually want to enjoy them, then you got to practice enjoying things. And then it makes everything kind of a good time, even the tough things that are not technically a good time. It's great. The last thing I wanted to say a bit more about is the people, enjoying people. Because one of the things that is true about me is that I have a past pattern of social anxiety, worrying what other people think of me, getting self-conscious, am I saying the wrong things? And especially in these settings where I admired all of the humans I was going to meet so much, I wanted them to think I was cool and interesting and all the things. So how did I put that down and just focus on being in the moment with them? It's really about focusing in on them instead of me. So instead of being self-conscious, being them conscious of what am I excited to actually know about this person? What questions do I want to ask them? That whole thing is a great strategy if you just have social anxiety, self-consciousness in general. And this beautiful gift was given to me, which was an early conversation in the weekend around the kitchen table at the name of the yoga retreat house is Elevation Central. And Jamie and I and Christy Lynn, who owns the house and is delightful with her Nashville Southern accent, we were having this beautiful, spontaneous, generative conversation about life and how it's connected to yoga and all these beautiful spiritual concepts. And one of the things that Jamie said was an Abraham Hicks quote that she'd heard recently, which is there's a party inside of everyone if you know where to look for it. Just as a way to kind of find a bridge of connection, even with people that you don't understand or that you don't like or whatever. there is a party going on inside of them somewhere, even if it's buried deep. And there was something about just this idea of like this party in each of us, and me feeling quite connected at this point to my party, which is, that is sort of the pleasure practice of it all, and the self-trust of it all is like, hey, there's a party going on in here. I have multitudes and they're all kind of delightful. And like, I can find love for so many of my parts now. And that makes it a party in here. And the fact that whether people know and love their party, that there is like a magical, I think of it as like literally like sparkly magic inside of everyone. The idea of it being a party is just like an extra delightful element to add. And so when you use that as sort of your grounding philosophy to interact with people, it makes interacting with people just so fun and delightful. I had this really fascinating conversation with this Uber driver who drove me from the Elevation Central Yoga Retreat House to the like hotel where the HC put us up. It's very fancy hotel downtown Nashville. He had so many ideas. He was so interesting. I barely understood him because of his Southern accent and my plugged ears. And yet like that was such a delightful, generative conversation with him. And I was like, I'm seeing the party inside of him, and like I'm connecting with him about it. Like Jamie and I, like, despite me being like semi-delirious and like 25% of my usual self was available to be interacted with because I was so out of it, we still ideated like the next 2 seasons of our podcast in that like pool sauna spree, which was so amazing. And like it just felt like a flow. It felt like our parties were like intermingling with whatever, the universe, magic in general. Like it just felt like a magical, things were flowing so easily, and the ideas were coming so clearly, and things were resonating so clearly. That's magic. That's what I'm talking about. And same with like the Hippocratic Collective stuff, like meeting with them over dinner and then having this whole summit day where different people were sparking against each other with different ideas. Like half the day felt like I was a part of someone's like SNL improv troupe with like people like pitching hilarious ideas to film for the internet. And like also so many of them are like deep random philosophers, would just like pull out like an insightful phrase or like interconnect something that they know and love and read about. And like each of them, it was so clear to me the party that was inside of them, and that they actually were quite close to the surface and able to like share their magic with all of us. And it was such like a magic sharing kind of time together. And being able to see that is not guaranteed, because I could have had the exact same day, but been so self-conscious about how are they interacting with me? And what does that mean about what they think about me? And am I okay? Am I inside or outside the group? I have this recurring self-consciousness with this particular group that I am too old because I am an elderly millennial and a bunch of them are younger than me and like know the internet better than me. So I could have hyper-focused on that. But instead, honestly, in part because like I didn't have that much energy to be self-conscious, I was just focused on this magic layer. I'm like, you're magic. Let's flow with this day. It made for a good day. And I also think it meant that what I was contributing to the group energy was centering the magic. Let's focus on the magic. And that felt very fun. And so seeing that magic in yourself and in other people, that is part of enjoying your difficulties. Because it like, no matter, even if you're in like intense difficulty, like you're in conflict with someone, if you're having a fight with someone, if you really disagree with someone, the idea that you and them may have this magical party inside of you, and that's always available to be exploring how to see in each other. You can still be fighting, and it will change your experience of that conflict. And so it will change your experience of that difficulty, like sort of the more interpersonal difficulties that can arise from humans humaning together, so another really core element. Yeah. And so I think those are the main things I wanted to say. I kind of had my 2 buckets, changing your relationship to difficulties and learning how to actually enjoy things, including human beings. Not guaranteed, and really a skill you have to practice over time, for sure. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say is the other thing that made all of this feel lower stakes is the fact that I have done so much work in my like regular life and regular work schedule for it to feel delightful much more of the time. and to pace out the work and the difficulties of my job. And so that a lot of my week still feels like kind of vacation vibes, like joy and pleasure vibes, even if it's a regular work week. Like right now, I'm at the beginning of my regular work week. I am technically working right now because I'm recording a podcast. I feel great. This is delightful. Like parts of my work are actually just like genuine creative delight, but they've found a way for them to be a part of my work. Hello. And so that means there's less pressure on vacations. Because when it used to be like work was pure misery, vacations were these like life rafts in the middle of a storm where I'm drowning. And so then if anything went wrong with a vacation, I would feel so bitter and so angry at it because I'm like, this was my only time to feel good and now it's ruined, right? So like putting enjoyable experiences into your regular routine will mean that when difficulties arise, both in those regular routine days, you'll have pockets of joy to recover in. But also it means that if you're really planning a big, exciting adventure, you will have more capacity to enjoy the difficulties because it won't be like the only joy you get to experience in your year. So that's the other like final thing and why I'm so obsessed with creating space, and we'll never stop talking about it. Okay, so those are all my lessons. I thought that'd be kind of an interesting way to debrief what happened. Obviously, I didn't go into all the details of all the things that happened, but just giving you little snapshots and snippets of my experience in a way that is hopefully kind of educational and generative for you as well. If anyone listening to this was a part of the HC Summit, or if Jamie's listening or whoever, like so much love and gratitude to each human. If the Uber driver somehow is listening to this, so much love to all of you and the magical people that I got to interact with. And so grateful that many of them I get to continue to have a relationship with through our creative and business ventures together. And how cool is that? Like so much of it still was that like, look around and how lucky I am to be alive right now, to quote Hamilton. And like, just really like, I have co-created with the universe that this is my life now. And I am here doing this particular work. And this trip is just the culmination of all these moments in the past where I was like, move in the direction of what brings you joy, what delights you, what lights you up. And this is a beautiful reward and result, even with its difficulties. I gotta take a deep breath after that. Like, it's kind of wild. So anyway, enjoy your difficulties, folks. I hope that felt useful. I really wanted it to translate in a way where you could really consider how to practice doing this. And if there's too many difficulties in your life right now and you're too overwhelmed, start small, start low stakes, start with one little thing. How could that one little thing that, yes, it's a thorn in your side, but how is it also kind of delicious in one way or another? Even if it's like just the cathartic joy of being really petty and like bitter about something. That is a way to enjoy your difficulty, you know? Like there's so many ways. And that pathway of finding pleasure in it is actually your pathway sort of out of it, or at least into a new relationship to it. And so it's worth exploring. So I hope you don't have too many difficulties this week. I hope it's not too fast, too much, too soon. And whatever, hopefully just low stakes, low pressure difficulties may stumble your way, may you find joy in the midst of them. And I'll talk to you next week. Bye. I would love to take this work deeper with you. Visit joanchanmd.com today and discover my growing menu of options for restorative medical education to suit your learning needs. I offer one-on-one coaching, customized workshops, and self-study courses that allow you to connect not only with my work on a deeper level, but also with other healthcare humans just like you. So if you want to start humanizing your work in healthcare to a deeper level and do it in community with others, please visit joanchanmd.com and find those options and what fits you and your life today.